Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, as-salatu was-salamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Welcome to our next session, which is our third session with regards to the life of the Prophet ﷺ, which we consider to be the greatest miracle of the Prophet ﷺ after the Quran. Today I want to trace our story back a little bit and go back and share some details about the childhood of the Prophet ﷺ. When the Prophet ﷺ was born to Amina, of course his father Abdullah had already passed away. And the male figure or the father figure for the Prophet ﷺ at the age of infancy was Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of the Prophet. The Prophet ﷺ was breastfed by a lady named Thuwayba, and Thuwayba was the slave of Abu Lahab. And she also was also feeding three other kids at the same time, which were her own child, whose name was Masruh, also Hamza, and Abu Salama bin Abdul Asad. Now, it might be surprising to hear that Hamza, who is actually the uncle of the Prophet, is being breastfed at the same time. And this is something which a lot of people don't know, that Hamza radiallahu anhu was very close in age, almost at the same time they're being breastfed. So they are 1 or 2 years apart from each other. And they were, besides being uncle and nephew, he was also like a brother to the Prophet ﷺ, and he was literally a foster brother of the Prophet ﷺ. And it was no surprise that when Hamza radiallahu anhu was killed, it was a great sorrow for the Prophet ﷺ, and he could never forget that. And whenever he would remember, he would cry a lot at the death of Hamza radiallahu anhu. So, of course, the Prophet ﷺ told us that whatever is forbidden by blood is also forbidden by breastfeeding, which means that if a child is breastfed by a person, then all of the relations that you would have otherwise with your own mother and through your own mother, like your other siblings and your grandmother and grandchild and all of those things, the same rules apply when it comes to breastfeeding as well. So, although the Prophet ﷺ was biologically the only child to his mother and his father, he did have a number of foster brothers and sisters, and we just mentioned 3 here, but there are more coming up later. Now, among the Arabs, the custom was that when a child would be born, they did not want the child's initial years to be spent in the city. Now, the city at the time of the Prophet's birth was still, a million times more purer than the cities of our time. But even in that time, they considered that city was not the best place for a child that is born of noble lineage and a child that they want to really grow up healthy and to pick up good language, proper Arabic language. They wanted these children to go out of the city and go in the desert to the Bedouins, because the Bedouins were the purest in their Arabic, and they had not experienced the distortion that occurs in cities as a result of the melting pot culture, where people come from all over the world. And especially Mecca was a place where people were coming from all over Arabia at that time. So, people would pick up, for example, in English, words like yo and what's up and things like that. These are not pure English words. So that's why they wanted the child to pick up pure Arabic, and that's why they would send them out. So a number of women came from the tribe of Banu Sa'ad, which was a Bedouin tribe. And they all came and they met with the Prophet's family. But none of them chose the Prophet ﷺ, because when they heard that his father had died, they felt that they would not be paid handsomely or rewarded handsomely for taking care of this child, and they all went and they picked other children. Now, Halima as-Sa'diyya did not find any other child for some reason, and she was about to go back empty-handed, and then she thought, this child is an orphan child. we're not going to get paid so much, but you know what? Maybe Allah will bless us in some way as a result of giving back. Sometimes people have to understand this, that you don't always get paid for everything that you do. A lot of times you do get paid, but if you are a sincere and honest person, you have good character, you shouldn't say, well, I'm only going to do this good thing if I get paid for it. 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10, you get paid for it, you get paid well, but sometimes you say, you know what, I'm just going to help somebody out. And if a person does that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards them much more than the other people who have gotten paid for every job that they did as a result of the goodwill gesture that a person puts forward. So Halima, she actually came out better than all of her other fellow tribes ladies, that what she got was better and a bigger reward than anyone else ever had. And I'm not just talking about from a spiritual perspective, or from a perspective that she had the best child in the world in her care, but actually financially, Halima as-Sa'diyah, she actually benefited very much. She took the child out of pity, just not to go back empty, and she told her husband, she said, let's take this child, Allah will do something good for us. And now she also had 3 other children, which also became foster siblings of the Prophet ﷺ. Their names were Abdullah and Anisa and Judama. And Judama was more famously known as Shayma, which was the foster sister of the Prophet ﷺ, and we'll have a story about her a little bit later. Now Halima picks up this child and she starts to go back. On the way to Mecca, her camel was the slowest and the weakest of camel. And one of the reasons for this was that the Banu Sa'd were living in an area which was actually affected by drought at that time. And they were in the most severe drought in that particular area. So they did not have enough to graze and did not have a lot of vegetation around. However, when she was coming back, she was on the slowest camel. On the way back with this child on that, her camel became the fastest camel. Her camel became the fastest camel. And she said that she immediately noticed that although it was a drought and they were not really eating much because there wasn't much around, she said that she was immediately full of milk, and she was able to feed all of her children to the point that they were completely full. And this was something which they had never had happen before, that all of our children were able to feed fully until they were completely satisfied. They would always have to be fed a little bit and then go to sleep crying because the other children had to be fed as well. But on this day, the first night, she says that all of my children, and including the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this new child, they all feed completely, fully, until they're completely satisfied, and they turn over and they sleep like, there's no tomorrow. They're just so full and they're so satisfied. She said she also noticed that her camel was immediately full of milk. And her sheep, when they would send their sheep out to graze, and all of the tribe's sheep would go out together by 1 or 2 shepherds, and she says that we noticed that all the other sheep are coming hungry, and they have hardly any milk in them, and the sheep of Halima, they're coming back and they're completely well fed, and they are full of milk, that the entire family, they're taking out milk, and they have so much that they drink to their fill, and then they are storing that milk as well. They're bring more pots, we have more milk. And this kept happening all the time that the Prophet ﷺ was there for the first 2 years. She was so happy with this child that she didn't want to give him back. And when the time came for the woman to come back to Mecca and give the children back after the period of breastfeeding is over, about 3 years or so, 2.5, 3 years, they came back, and she said to Halima as-Sa'diyah that I would like to take this child back and let him stay with me. The city environment is not, so she made whatever excuses she could make to try to convince her, and eventually Amina relented, and she gave her consent that she can take the Prophet ﷺ back for a little bit more time. Now, as soon as they go back, an incident happens which is mentioned by Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu. He said that one day, as Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was playing with other children, and he's now around 3 years old or so, he's playing with other children near Halima's house, and Jibreel alayhi salam appeared and made Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam lie down as a child. He then opened up the boy's chest and took out his heart and extracted a lump of flesh from it, saying that this is the portion of shaitan in you. This is the portion of shaitan in you. Then he put Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's heart in a golden tray filled with Zamzam water and washed it and replaced it back in the chest. And the other children ran to Halima in terror, crying that Muhammad has been killed, Muhammad has been killed. Because they, of course, couldn't understand how could somebody's chest be open and they could still live. They simply saw two men came and they basically cut open the chest of this child, so they ran back. When the parents or the Halima and her husband came running, they found the boy alive, his face completely pale from shock. And Anas radiallahu anhu later said that he saw the scar on the Prophet's chest where it had been sewn back together. He saw that scar on the chest of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now this scared Halima, and she actually came back to Amina and she said, you know what, we rather give him back because, I'm not sure if they told her all the details, but, they said, we want to give him back and here is your child and fi amanillah. The Prophet ﷺ, when he grew up, of course, as a prophet, he would remember the things that he learned and experienced in Banu Sa'ad. In fact, at the end of the Battle of Hunayn, which happened towards the end of the life of, actually it happened in the 8th year, 2 years before the Prophet passed away, a group of captives were brought, and among them was a woman who was saying that, hey, don't touch me, I'm the sister of Muhammad, I'm the sister of Muhammad. And the Sahaba, they were very surprised. They said, we never heard that the Prophet had any sister. So they came and they brought her to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet met with her, and she said that I'm your sister, and I still have the mark on my back where you bit me. So as a child, he must have bit her. Perhaps she was bothering him or something. And he had bit her, and she still had a mark. And the Prophet ﷺ recognized her, and she said, "Are you Shayma?" And she said, "Yes, I am Shayma." And the Prophet ﷺ immediately got up, and he took off his upper garment, and he laid it down on the floor, and he made her sit down over there with him, and he honored her, and he said to the Sahaba that, "I am giving up my right. I am giving up my right and the right of Quraysh," because he was basically the head of Quraysh on the Muslim side. So he said that I'm giving up the right of Quraysh, meaning that what happened is that when they would have a battle and they would take captives, the captives would be equally divided among the fighters. So the Prophet said that I am giving up my right from the Quraysh side. So the Ansar, they followed and they said, "Ya Rasulullah, we also give up our right." So all of these captives, which were basically the foster relatives of the Prophet ﷺ, they were all freed, and they went home happily. After this, the Prophet ﷺ went back to the warmness of his mother under the care of the grandfather. And it is mentioned that Amina would often hug her son, and she would embrace him. And Abdul Muttalib could not bear the absence of his grandson Muhammad, and he would never get tired of looking at him. He would see in his grandson his son, and visited him every morning and every evening to check on him. And he, of course, as we mentioned yesterday, that he noticed these amazing characteristics in this child, and he would let him sit along with him on the same place, while all the other children of Abdul Muttalib were to sit on the floor. Now, Amina asked Abdul Muttalib that she wanted to visit her relatives in Yathrib, and to visit the grave of her husband Abdullah, and to let the child spend some time with his maternal uncles. He gave permission, and he advised her to take care of herself and her son. So Amina and her slave girl, whose name was Barakah, who we also know as Ayman, they set out. And the Prophet ﷺ, he loved Barakah, who was this young girl, very much like a family member. In fact, she is one of the mother figures of the Prophet ﷺ that we know as Ayman radiallahu anha. And she was the one who actually outlived the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet would always refer to her, and he would go to her for comfort like a son would go to the mother for comfort. When they got to Yathrib, the fever, which was a common fever in Yathrib, affected Amina. And on her way back, her condition worsened, and she passed away at the position, or at a place called Abwa. And she succumbed to her illness. She died there, and she was buried there. It is said that the Prophet ﷺ, as a child, wept very bitterly at the time because he was an orphan from his mother and his father now. And it is also mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, at a later time, as a prophet, he was traveling with the companions somewhere, and he stopped at Abwa, and he basically distanced himself from the caravan, and he said, "Give me some time." And he went and he sat on the grave of his mother Amina, and he cried until his beard and his clothes and the place where he was sitting was all wet, remembering the memories of his mother Amina. And then after she had died there on the way, it was Baraka Ayman that took him back to Makkah to his grandfather. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, we'll continue tomorrow. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.